This video is the second part to my tutorial on Metricbeat. In the first video, I showed how to install, configure, set up, and secure Metricbeat. I also demonstrated some of the out-of-the-box dashboards that give you insight into the performance of your servers. So if you don't know how to do any of that, I will leave a link to the first video in the description of this video. For this video, I want to explain how to email ourselves an alert if specific server metrics exceed the thresholds that we define. I will demonstrate this with an example that monitors disk space usage on each of our servers. So by the end of this video, you should have a good grasp of what Metricbeat can do and how to use Kibana Alert rules and how to use an open source tool called Logstash to send emails. And while watching this video, if you find the contents of the video helpful, press the like button because I want this video to help as many people as possible. And if you want to be informed of new videos as we release them, press the subscribe button. So let's get started. The first thing I notice is that this metric here that shows 35% disk usage seems to be an average across all the partitions of all my servers. And I didn't see any single visualization within all of the Metricbeat dashboards that break down disk usage by partition and server. So let me check something. This is my Evermite 1 server and this is my Evermite 2 server. Right, so when we're seeing this 35%, it's probably an average across both of these machines for every partition, for every file system. Whereas the one I really care about most is this disk, because this one will probably be the one that's most actively written to if I were to use these machines. So I want to send myself an email alert if this exceeds 70% or if this exceeds 70%. But before I do that, I find it useful to have a visualization that shows the disk usage for just the partitions I care about on each machine. This step is completely optional, but let's just do it anyway. Let's make a copy of this widget and edit it to display the disk usage of specific partitions. Let me copy to dashboard. Oh wait, I should be able to duplicate this. Clone panel. All right. Okay, so we are gonna edit the queries for this. And what we'll do is, instead of reading the memory used, we're gonna read disk space. Whoops, let me just type this in. System.filesystem. I believe it was used. Yeah, percentage. So we'll read this property. Now, if we were to read this and just leave the query as that, it would still return every single one of these as a result, but I only care about this one. So I'm going to add an additional filter to filter on just that property. I believe the field is called device name. Let me just, not this channel. Let's go over here. System.filesystem.device name. Oh, look, it's got a helpful suggestion here already. There we go. And if you're ever curious about what fields are available to you, you can go back to the Discover here. Let me just open up when it loads. You can find that all the fields are available here as a glossary, or just go to the Metricbeat documentation and you'll have a description of every single one of these fields that you can filter on. All right, so I think that's all we really need. Let's go ahead and press save. Yeah, and you can see the preview. Evermite 2 38.8%, and this one's 38.8%. It's aggregated by the let me just click back over here. Yep, aggregate by the host.name. So Evermite 1 or Evermite 2. All right, so this looks good. Let's just save and return. All right, we have this over here, and let's minimize these. And I think, yeah, so that's helpful for me later on. And now let's actually go work on the email alerts. Here, let me just make this a little bit more organized. Oh, and I should probably rename this. There we go. Okay. So let's, oh, and actually we can test this out. I'm going to load some files onto, let's say Evermite 1. So I'm going to pause and just load a lot of movie files onto this server to push the disk space up. So I'll be back in a moment. Okay, so I loaded a bunch of movie files on Evermite 1 server. So you can see it's now 76% used, and Evermite 2 is 39%. I come over here. This number has been slowly increasing up. Not sure what, oh, I know why it's taking so long. It's I have to change this time frame. Let's just change it to 2 minutes. Hit refresh. There we go. Okay, so 75.2%, pretty close to the metric reported here. And oh, don't forget to press save. So let me just save this dashboard. So now we should be ready to move on to the email alerts. I will click to this drop-down menu. Let's set up our email alerts, rules and connectors, and you should find yourself over here. The rules and connectors area is a place where you can specify conditions for Kibana to look out for. And those conditions can be anything about the Elastic Stack or Kibana. Those conditions can then trigger notifications and other actions. But when you come to the rules and connectors area for the first time within a freshly installed Elastic Stack, you might see a message like this saying additional setup is required. And that's because the additional setup that's required is actually another property that you need to add to your kibana.yaml file. And let me just paste it into this window. You basically need to add this property to your kibana.yaml file to enable this rules and connectors area. And this property needs to be, I think, at least 32 characters. So I'm just going to make one up right now, something simple. And by the way, this value that you assign here is going to have to be a secret. So do not expose this to anyone else. I'm just keeping it very simple like this just for demonstration purposes. Now I can just add this straight to my Kibana file. So if I went to my Kibana server like this, I've SSH to my Kibana server. If I go to cd Kibana and I open up this file, I could just add this string to the end of this file, restart Kibana, and that would actually enable this page. But because this value here should be kept a secret, I'm actually going to use the Kibana key value store instead. So if I go to the USR directory, share Kibana binary directory, in here you should see this executable or binary Kibana key store, which is what we're going to use. So let me actually just use the help so you can see what actions are available or what flags are available for this executable. We can list existing key stores values. Right, so this was just from the initial installation of Elasticsearch and Kibana, so that Kibana can talk to Elasticsearch. Let's actually go ahead and add a new one, which is this property here. Oh, I need the add flag. All right, and now we paste in the value. And if I do a restart of Kibana, I believe that should enable everything. I just want to see if there's any errors. Okay, it's starting. Okay, so I'll pause and wait a minute or so for Kibana to restart. All right, let's see if it's started up now. If I hit refresh, oh, looks like I might have to log in again, so let me do that. Okay, so now we should be able to create rules. Let's see. Yep, everything is here. We can start establishing our conditions and setting up alerts and everything. Okay, so our goal is to email us an alert if a particular disk exceeds 70% usage. So whether it's this device on Evermite 1 exceeding 70% usage, or this disk on Evermite 2 exceeding 70% usage, send us an email alert. So that means we need the Kibana to run a query to look specifically for this device name and its percentage used. If it exceeds 70%, write that record to a Kibana log file. Then we're going to use logstash to parse that Kibana log file and send a message via SMTP. So that's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and do that. Create a rule. Let's say disk usage. That's the name of our rule. We'll check every minute and we'll notify every time it's active. Or every time this scan happens. And which rule type do we want to use? This metric threshold came with Metricbeat, I believe, but I'm not going to use this. I'll just go straight to, let's say, a more raw approach to do this. And I believe it would be, let's write our own Elasticsearch query. And we will use, I'll use a KQL or Lucene query. All right, so we're going to look in the Metricbeat index. And the filter we're looking for is system dot used dot percentage is, let's say, is greater than or equal to. Wait, is that the right? Yep, greater than or equal to 0.7. So that's 70%. And let's say we need to know the exact partition file system dot device name. That's the one. And we only want this one. If you have other partitions you want to monitor on, just add it to the conditions to filter. If it's if we get more than one document in this query over the last, let's say, 2 minutes, doesn't have, and we'll return every record. All right. So I believe that should be it. We could set up the connector now, but I'm not going to. I just want to see if this rule actually fires. Oh, I could have pressed test query. I should have did that. In fact, let's do that again. Let's just test this query to make sure. Yep. So we have some records returning. So we know that this rule works. I will just see if this turns from pending to OK or active. OK means that the rule is working. Active means it's working and the conditions are met. So we can actually now have this condition trigger a connector. All right. So this condition is active. Now let's publish the results to the server log, to the Kibana server log. We don't have a connector, so we'll create one for the first time. We can call this anything we want. We'll just say notifications. Probably you should name it something more unique and specific to you. The level, we'll set it to, so the level is almost thought of as a tag that's appended to the log, so that later on you can filter your log results based on this level. So it's really for you after the fact, for you to query, just for better ways of parsing your log file. And whether it's considered, this is considered error, debug, warning, or error, that really just depends on your context, whether you consider this an error or a warning Or like if we set this to, let's say 50%, maybe I'll consider that this first notification a warning. But if it gets up to 90%, maybe, let's see if there are other levels I can flag this. Maybe maybe we can consider an error. No, it won't really be an error, but hopefully you get the idea. You just use this for your own purposes in terms of filtering messages out of the log later, which you'll actually see me do when I'm working with Logstash. All right, so now we can post a message here. These variables are like mustache-like variables. There are more that you can select from over here. There's a description of each one of these variables if you want to use them. But I already have a message I prepared ahead of time, so I'm going to use this instead. So give me a second, copy, and I'll paste it into here. All right, so I'll just state the name of the alert, which is this over here. And then I'll just say I wrote my own message, exceeded 70% disk usage over the time frame that's specified in our query just earlier above. A link back to this Kibana dashboard, and also the results of this actual query. So it could send up to 100 results of this. And the results here are going to be similar to what you have when you were working with the analytics discover area. It's going to be similar schema that comes back. So yeah, let's go ahead and save this, and it should start publishing these records to the Kibana.log. And I'll hit refresh. Now if I go to my Kibana server back over here, I'll clear this. And in a moment, I'll pause for a few minutes and wait for records from this active response to publish to this Kibana.log file. Or actually, maybe it's already there. Let me just see. Oh, sorry, not this directory. Maybe it's already here. Nope, not yet. I'm at the bottom of the file, so I'll give it a minute or so. All right, it's been about a minute. Let's take a look at the Kibana.log file. And yes, you can actually see, let me actually make this window a bit bigger. So you can actually see the message pasted into here. Condition met, exceeded 70%. These are this stringified version of a JSON object. These are the actual result set that came back from the query that we established with this. So the results of this query up here is actually embedded into this Kibana.log file that we can use Logstash to parse out in a moment. So we want to install Logstash on the same server as Kibana, just so Logstash can ingest that Kibana log file. And you can find the installation for Logstash on the Elasticsearch website here. We're going to use the apt-get approach. And the first few steps is exactly the same as Kibana, which is adding the appropriate repositories. And those repositories and references and dependencies are exactly the same as Kibana. So I've already done those steps. If you haven't done it, you can do them yourself. But really, I can just skip down to this last step here, since all my dependencies have already been met on the Kibana server itself. And I'll just install Logstash like this. And it should be pretty quick. And there we go. Logstash has been installed. To use Logstash to ingest our Kibana log and email alerts, we need to specify some instructions through configuration details. I already prepared configuration details in advance, so let me start a new file. I'll just call it logstash.conf. It doesn't really matter what you call it. And I will copy the object. There we go. And I will leave a link in the description of this video that links to this file so that you can download it and use it for yourself. So let me give a quick crash course on creating configuration details for Logstash. Logstash configuration details have two mandatory stages. The first mandatory stage is the input stage. And with the input stage, which is this code block that I have highlighted here, you use the input stage to specify the source of the data that you want to ingest. And the other mandatory stage is the output stage, which is all the way at the bottom over here, and I have highlighted. The output stage is where you specify where you want Logstash to output the data to. Now there is an optional stage, which is this section over here that I have highlighted, and this is the filter stage. Now because it's optional, you can completely omit this code block here. But the reason I have a filter stage here is because I use it to transform some of the data that comes in from the input source before it gets to the output. So transform as in I might want to massage some of the data or format the data differently, create some new event data variables, things like that. So you use the filter stage to do any extra manipulation of the data that you need before it gets to the output. Right? So again, the filter stage is completely optional, but it's the input stage and the output stages that are mandatory. And having all three of these stages in one configuration object forms a Logstash pipeline. So these stages are executed in the order that they are specified in this pipeline, or in the order that they're specified in this configuration file. So the input first, then the filter, and then the output. So let's look closely at the input stage first. In the input stage, I'm saying I want to use a file plugin to read the Kibana.log file. Now this file plugin is just one of many plugins that you can use in the input stage. So if I go to the Elastic website and look at Logstash for the input plugins, you can see that a file is just one of many plugins that you can use. There are a lot of other plugins that you can use, and each will have different property sets that you'll have to configure if you want to use that plugin. So coming back to this file plugin, the way I've configured it is that I'm saying I want to read the Kibana.log file. Now this log file is going to be a list of JSON objects, and that's why I say for the type and codec, I'm going to use JSON. And the other thing I did was I specified beginning for the start position. This means I want Logstash to read from the beginning of the Kibana.log file and keep track of what it last ingested. This way, if I restart Logstash, it will pick up where it last left off and not repeat ingesting content from a previous Logstash instance or a previous Logstash run. Now let's jump to the output stage. In the output stage, I'm saying I want to use the email plugin to relay the contents of Kibana.log to an SMTP server. And this email plugin is just one of many plugins that you can choose for the output. So again, if I go to the Kibana website for Logstash, there's a list of many different output plugins that you can use, and email is just one of them. Okay, so coming back to the screen. So in terms of how I'm configuring this email plugin, I'm saying that I want to email all alerts to just some fake address, and it's going to come from just some fake address. The subject of the email is alert followed by a variable called alert name, or the correct terminology is event data field called alert name, and I'll come back later to explain how to create event data fields. And the body of the email is the email body event data field followed by the raw message event data field. Now my inbox requires authentication, so this is the username and this is the password for this email address, or actually for this SMTP account. All right, so that's how this email block works. So for the SMTP service, I like to actually use a website called Mailtrap for testing and dev purposes. It's free and you can set up as many inboxes as you want. I've created one here, And you can see some of the connection settings. This is the username. This is the password, which I've pasted into here already. You can see this is the host and address, which I've pasted here and also pasted in the port number right over here. So that is basically the email block. And the reason I like using Mailtrap as my test SMTP server is because any emails that I send to Mailtrap will stay in this sandbox area. So no emails ever actually go out, which is part of the reason I can use these fake addresses for the to and from field. So that's basically the email block. So the other plugin I have here is the standard out. And what this will do is that it'll just print the email body straight to the terminal window here. And that way it just makes it easier for us to debug during this demonstration. But for production usage, you could really just go ahead and delete this whole block like that. Right? But for now, it'll just be easier to leave it here for debug purposes. So that's the standard out block. The other thing you'll notice is this if statement here, which is saying if log.level is equal to error, then we execute these two plugins. If the log level is anything else, or if the log.level doesn't exist, then these two plugins won't actually execute. So if you recall, coming back to our Kibana rules, if I hit edit on this rule, you'll notice that we actually specified this level to be error, and this actually gets written to our Kibana.log file. So if I scroll all the way down, you can see that there's a log.level equals error over here. And there's another record over here, log.level equals error. And only for those records with log.level equals error will these two plugins execute. So this also means that you could change this if statement if you want, or you can completely remove it. And if you completely remove it, then these two plugins will execute all the time. You can also write some more plugins outside of this if statement that fire all the time, or just write more if statements for different plugins if you want to. Now, coming back to the event data fields like the log.level, alerts name, message, email body, if you want to know what are all the fields that you have access to, you can create a different standard out plugin and just dump everything to command line. Right here, this one is saying just dump only the email body. But if you dump everything, then you'll be able to see everything. So let me do that right now. So let me try typing something like this in here so that this block never fires. And then I will copy this block. And I'll paste it outside of the if statement here. And what I will do is I'll put everything. And now we can run this file by simply typing now it has to be an absolute path. So this might take a moment to start up, so I'll pause for a moment until it actually loads up. Okay, things finally loaded up. And what you're seeing here is Logstash just outputting the contents of what it ingests in Kibana.log straight to standard out. And these are the event data fields that you have access to, like conditions met, process, PID. And if we were to look for log.level, it would be, let me see if I can find it. Scrolling up a little bit more. Maybe over here it is, like log and nested in here .level. So it might not be as pretty, or the code isn't formatted in a pretty way, but hopefully you can read the nested curly braces to find that this is log.level. Now some of these variables are coming straight from, or some of these event data fields are just default to Logstash, while others, like let's say alerts name up here, that is an event data field that I instantiated within the filter stage in my configuration object. So I'll talk to more about that in a moment. And while logstash is running, it's constantly watching any changes for Kibana.log. And as more records are added to Kibana.log, then logstash will just keep outputting it here to stand it out. So I'm going to stop this for a moment because now we understand how to grab event data fields. So let's open up our configuration file again. I'll delete this standard out because we don't really need it anymore. And let's focus on the filter stage next. So I'm using the filter stage to parse some of the Kibana log data into other event data fields that I can then further manipulate. So if I were to, let's say, look at the Kibana.log file, and I'll just go to the bottom. So if we, let's say, so here's one of the more recent records for Kibana.log, and you can see that there's a field here called message, and inside that message is the templated message that we wrote into our rule here. So if you look into our rule here, so we say alert name conditions met, and this basically just a blob of text. And you can see that blob of text is already here, but I want to parse all this information out. Right? Oh, in fact, you can see the 6 hyphens here. So the 6 hyphen here denotes the end of the message. So I want to parse useful information out of this. And to do that, in fact, let me just copy this for a moment. Copy all this text. All right. So to parse this, I can use a grok filter. Right, so a filter, sorry, I can use a grok plugin for this filter. And let me pull up a website. Again, in the filter stage, there are a lot of plugins you can use. And one of the plugins I want to use is grok. And grok is a way to pattern match some things in a string and assign them to variables. And we can use a debugger to demonstrate how all this works. So let me find a grok debugger. So here's a grok debugger. Kibana actually has one, but sometimes it's just like coming out here to do it. So anyway, I will paste the content from that Kibana.log file, and I will test the pattern that I've created here. So let's copy this, paste it into here. And what this is saying, oh, let me get rid of this quotation mark. So what this is saying is, if I scroll up a little bit, I expect the words server log -alert name, server log -alert name, then some content here. So this data prefix is basically a regular expression, or it represents a regular expression. And let's look for some grok patterns. So this website here shows a list of a bunch of grok patterns that you can use. So you can see data represents this regular expression here. And that's what's basically happening here. A regular expression that captures this information and assign it to the event data field name alert name. Then -conditions met, -conditions met, a grok pattern, again a regular expression, and assign the content to conditions met. So assign this to conditions met, and et cetera, et cetera. And the hits over here, it's hard to see, but oh, here it is. Hits, this all gets assigned as a string to this hit list variable here. So that's all the grok does, and you can see that was successful. Now you can see here, this hit list is a string. It's not an actual JSON object yet, so we're gonna have to JSON parse this into an actual JSON object later. But you can pretty much see that standard text has been placed into these event data fields. So that's what this plugin, this grok plugin will do. Looks at the message variable, takes that string and applies the grok pattern, and now we have these new event data fields in that will be available to us further down this pipeline. as well as the standard out. In fact, you saw this in the standard out just moments ago. All right, so the next plugin we want to do is mutate. Now I mentioned that this hit list was a string, and not only that, what it actually looks like is something like this. Right, so it looks something more like this, which basically means it's just printing a string to an empty text area. But what we need to do is we actually need to put square braces around it to make it a valid JSON array, because this is actually not valid JSON data, right? But the moment you wrap it with square braces, then it becomes a JSON array. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking this variable hit list, putting square braces around it to force it to be an actual JSON string, or a valid JSON string that we can then, as you can see in this plugin here, we're taking this actual JSON string, which is this, and now turning into an actual JSON object and giving it the event data field name, hits. And once we're done, we go ahead and delete this variable because I don't need it to appear in the standard out, or I don't need it to appear anywhere really. So let's just delete it from memory. But hits is now available to us. All right, so that's what these first few plugins will do. Then coming down to the next step in the pipeline, I'm going to use the Ruby filter. The Ruby plugin. So the Ruby plugin will actually let me write some Ruby code. Now I'm not really a strong Ruby developer. This is just me putting something together. And what I want to do with this Ruby code is I want to actually create the email body message that I want to put into my email. So I start an empty string, and the eventual message that I want to achieve is something like this. Let me see if I can find it. So eventually I want to create an email message that kind of looks like this, right? Conditions met, print this, print a link that you can click on to go to the actual message for this alert, print which servers are exceeding the disk usage threshold along with how much disk usage was used, and then just a raw data dump of everything else. So that's what I'm trying to do here. Assemble the conditions met, which you can see over here, put in the link, and again, these event data fields, conditions met and link, were available because I parsed them out over here with the grok filter. All right, assemble the email body, grab all the hits. Now that this is a valid JSON object, which is really an array now, if it's an array, then I'm going to loop through that array of all the hits. So these hits are basically what satisfies this query filter over here. Okay. So I'm going to loop through each hit, and basically I just want to pluck out the host name, which is basically, I want to pluck out the host name and then print the disk usage, right? So pluck out the host name, and if the alert name is disk usage, then basically I want to parse out the system file system use percentage, convert to float, multiply by 100, and then append it to the string, and eventually append it to another variable string, and eventually append it to my email body over here, right? So that should achieve this result. And at the very end, just append all the raw message. Oh, actually, this is going to be done in the output stage later. But anyway, I now have my email body, and I'm going to add it to another event data field called metadata body. And that's basically all my filter stage does. And that's why this email body is now available here in the output. Oh, I should probably fix this. Okay, so that's basically all there is to the filter stage. And by the way, I left an if-else statement here so that later on we can customize the message for email body if we have other beats that we want to install later. All right, so that is basically that. And we can basically run our file now. So let me actually do that. So we should be able to run our logstash configuration object now and start ingesting Kibana logs and output them to our email. So let's go ahead and do that. Logstash, binary logstash, and the configuration object that we want to use is the absolute path to. Right now, this will take a moment or so to start up, so I'll just pause the video until this finally loads up. Okay, so things have started up. Let's take a look at our inbox. Right, we're already getting a message saying this was the email body that I created. Exceed 70% over 2 minutes. And if we could actually just use this link to go to Kibana. Server Evermite 1 server is at 75.2% disk usage. And this was the raw message that you actually find in your kibana.log file in case we need to look at the exact trace of anything. Let's just for curiosity, I want to set Evermite 2 to exceed 70% disk usage as well. So I'm going to go to here and just give me a moment. I'll pause for a moment to load up a lot of content onto the server as well. All right, I've put a lot of movie files on Evermite 2 server as well, and now it's also at 76% disk usage. I can already see that Logstash is sending out email alerts for Evermite 2, 71 point, let's see. Yeah, so now Evermite 2 is also part of this message here, and if we actually look in our Metricbeat dashboards, let's change this time frame. Right now it says 15%. So it says for over the last 15 minutes, disk usage of Evermite 2 is 44% or so. But if we shorten this time frame to 2 minutes, I think this should be closer to 76%. There we go. All right. So yeah, and I think that's it for now. In the future, I'll produce more videos on other beats that you can use for monitoring your IT infrastructure. And if you found the video useful, give a like. And if you want to stay on top of the videos being released, just subscribe to this channel.